Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Let's settle into our evening with some meditation. So, having established our comfortable sitting position, aligning our body with some degree of symmetry, balance, poise, helping to enable an inner mindful presence. Our eyes gently closed, helping to bring our awareness within, and having our initial deep, relaxing, letting go breath, using that outgoing breath to carry away any tensions, tightness, contraction from the body, any stresses through the happening of the day, the happening of the week so far, letting go, using this time to settle down and settle into this practice of simply being and knowing, rather than being caught into doing and thinking. Time for simply being here, being now, being aware in a calm, receptive, attentive, objective way, allowing the mind to become calm and still, allowing the heart to open up to being present, present and receptive, a heartful knowing. Meditation is a cultivating and creating of heart space, mindful, heartful, inner space, even what we might call spiritual space, space for simply being, nourishing the whole of our being in this inner space. And using our breath as our reference point for the present, meditation is practicing being present. But before giving attention to the breath, just relaxing awareness into the body. This platform for experience the body, particularly the felt experience. Feeling our feet connecting with the floor. Feeling the body connecting with the chair, cushion, or meditation stool. Feeling the placement of our hands and fingers resting in our lap. Relaxing the abdomen belly area, softening the belly, and feeling the movement of the abdomen belly area as the body breathes. Feeling into this subtle, soothing sensation, a gentle rising, falling of the abdomen. And also sensing and feeling the movement of the chest, especially relaxing the chest area of any contraction. Feeling the soothing movement of chest, abdomen, belly. And maybe also sensing our face, maybe the air connecting with our face. and perceiving subtle light coming in through the closed eyelids. And even looking into that lightness, brightness, blankness. Not being distracted or disturbed by background sounds that we might hear. And likewise for the sound or sight of thoughts that might occur, but rather choosing to bring mindful awareness to the sensation of our breath, wherever we feel it the most, maybe the nose nostril area. Feeling the inflow, outflow sensation of each breath, while also looking into that lightness, brightness through the closed eyelids. Using a mental word or two in the mind as a mental mantra, if that's helpful, aligned with the in-breath and the out-breath. Relaxing into the present moment with ease, with joy. Receiving each in-breath, the gift of life with the in-breath, and returning that gift to the space around us with the out-breath. Attending to each breath faithfully, consciously, kindly. Allowing the mind to quieten into this heartfelt knowing, present now knowing. Please help yourself to some tea and biscuits. So, how are we feeling this evening? Good. Feeling is okay. Feeling good, feeling okay, feeling present. More present. More pleasant. Pleasant or present? Present. That's good. The feeling of being present. So this evening, the first Thursday after we've had a retreat day. So we usually have a bit of a debrief, share what we've maybe heard as being significant, any insights we may have, any comments, any even just any questions, but also a sense of how did it feel to be on a retreat oneself for a period of time for the day, and meditations, and also the feeling of being in the presence of a Buddhist monk as well, that being significant. And part of this is a reminder of what we have heard, or things we didn't hear, even though we may have been present, but something that we didn't remember or didn't hear. Other people might have heard and sort of seen significance or felt significance in a particular point of teaching. So in that way, we as a collective, a community, a sangha can grow from everybody's presence of being here on those occasions, both the Thursday night and the Sunday meditation day. So most of you probably were here on the Thursday night, and some of you were here on the Sunday. And even if you weren't, still it's great to hear what it was like and what was said, so that one doesn't miss out. Even obviously, there's a chance to listen to see the video, listen to what was said from the videos that when we do get those up. But certainly a shared experience in the context of what we call ewa me sutang, Pali words for thus have I heard, sharing what we heard and what might have been significant. Does anyone like to share what might have been significant or what they heard, what stood out for them?
I prepared notes.
Good, good. Yeah, Scott.
I guess in my experience of the start, like oftentimes I feel quite overwhelmed and yeah, there's usually quite a lot of fairly extreme reactivity and presence as well. But yeah, so it's usually overwhelming, and sometimes I wonder how much did I hear. But anyway, some some things that I was recalling was the samadhi and insight. I mean, I've heard kind of this talked about before, but it was a good reminder, and maybe you heard it in a new way or something more. The like the process of perceiving process and getting some how it gets tangled with eye making and the distortion that comes from that. It's an ongoing interest. And then some other things that was significant to me was hearing him talk about kind of extreme and volatile reactivity, and how just sitting and observing might not kind of cut it is kind of how I heard it, and the usefulness of supports, and I was remembering before, and then so with karma, if you've had wrong actions, how there's the opportunity for right actions to kind of balance things out. And then a comment which seemed to go deep for me was also that he said he was learning not to sweat the small stuff or something like that. That was helpful too. So that's
good. Thanks for sharing. Certainly, there's a lot in that, and I think that just reminding us what we did here, and certainly those salient points there, and one of the significant things that, as you mentioned, Scott, that the Ajahn Tiradhammo did say was about being aware of perception. That how we perceive is significant, because often we're seeing through the eye as opposed to direct, correct, objective perception of things, and that's where a lot of the I making, the self making, the me making, the my making occurs at that point of perception, identifying not just that's just a sound or a sight, but that is mine and reminds me of, and a whole cascade of mental processes, feeling processes happen that create this sense of identity, and through that, so being able to be aware of the perception is, and especially in that sort of just a basic sensory perception, pure and simple. He mentioned in that the discourse. He didn't sort of mention the name of the discourse, but the discourse, the teachings to Bahia, which is a very significant teaching. It's about developing that clarity, discernment that's able to perceive just hearing, just seeing, just smelling, tasting, touching, feeling, just cognizing, without sort of personalizing and adding on to it, because that's at that cutting edge of where the mind makes the whole sense of me, and that's where the drama occurs. That's where suffering occurs. In the discourse to Bahia, Bahia, after hearing this teaching very succinct, brief teaching, just a couple of sentences, he becomes fully enlightened. He wasn't ordained as a monk, um, but he was obviously ready and receptive and listened well, and let go of ignorance through the very sort of basic teaching, which is probably, I haven't fully read this, but would be in his book as well, Beyond Eye Making. Any other thoughts or considerations, Brendan?
Not sure if I'm remembering this exactly, but one, I guess, concept that I took away from it is that idea of when you're always immersed in water, you don't know what it's like to be out of the water. And so I guess hopefully, if I'm understanding this correctly, by developing the deep samadhi, you get the opportunity to experience when there's no self. And through that, then you can better understand what that self is and the creation of the self. That's one thing I've been struggling with and still struggle with, that idea of like, what is the self and what is it to not be the self? And it's very hard to see that because we're just immersed in the self all the time.
That's right. That's right. The self can't not be the self.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just, if it's a self outside of the self, it's just the self.
Yeah. So I think I'm hopefully starting to understand that the power of that deep concentration is that opportunity to experience when there's no self.
Yeah. So but you're not experiencing it.
Correct. It's just not there. So yeah, still trying to understand that. But that was something that took away from me.
And I think that was another significant point, which he certainly sort of alluded to on a couple of occasions, and particularly even putting into the context of where he said most of the significant religious traditions, spiritual traditions, have the practice of moving the mind away from being caught up in the selfing process, what we call ego, through various practices, including primarily meditation, to be able to allow that deeper domain of our being, conscious knowing, to be free from the interface of experience through self, which is a limiting factor. And then, as you mentioned, Brendan, from that knowing awareness, not self-awareness, but knowing awareness, there is a knowing of a freedom that's not limited by the contraction and limitations that self as a constructed fabric, mental fabric, imposes on the mind. And therefore, particularly if that's a deep, profound insight, not for self, but for just the pure knowing awareness, then that helps to reorientate how the self then is engaged and used, and how the individual lives their life, which in Buddhism is seen as the first stage of enlightenment. There can be little glimpses of it beforehand, but if it's significant enough, it's the first stage of enlightenment. It can then flow through to a more profound full enlightenment. And as a significant point that again, that's where most traditions are helping people to move the mind beyond just this limiting factor self, and that awareness of what is beyond self goes by different names. As the Ajahn said, in Buddhism it's called nirvana, in Christianity it would be called God, in Hinduism it's called Brahman or Atman, or self with a capital S. Other traditions, other names. And again, these are just concepts to describe that unconditioned ultimate reality. And meditation being sort of the main practice for enabling that sort of the clouds, clouds parting. So this is the light, enlightenment.
John, if I heard you correctly, you said the self is imposed on the mind. But isn't the self created by the mind as a default mechanism or system or prediction pattern tool to so you can just quickly adapt to your current situation, and therefore the behaviour is created to smoothen your past and make it more rapidly, and then there's a feedback mechanism that says yes, this is correct or not correction, but it's in minimal seconds. Is that it's not sort of imposed on the mind, but it's more created by the mind? Is that
Yeah. I guess the ignorance, and the Ajahn mentions as well, the ignorance is what causes the stress and suffering, so that the mind-body complex needs a self, needs this relational tool, needs this convenient designator for being able to survive. But the problem is that when there's a misperception or misunderstanding, and the mind identifies as the self, that's the problem. So let's say an enlightened person, still there's a self there, but it's known to be just a construct, a communication device. It's one of these to be used skillfully. So the sense of, if I was the mind uses the phone, but the mind knows that it's not the phone. The unenlightened mind says, I am the phone. It's an iPhone, it's me, and everything's personalized. So enlightenment, from my understanding, is then the realization that the self is a construct, and the mind's no longer identifying as that construct. It's just a helpful tool. And I define the self as a neurologically based psychological phenomena created for the purpose of receiving information, calculating information, communicating information for the welfare of mind and body. And certainly the self, as the Ajahn mentioned, does modify and change over time. And part of the work of spiritual practice is not just realizing that the self is a construct, but also developing a healthy self. It's like, programming the self so it works rightly. Because often when the self is identified as this is me, and then there's a lot of reactions and resistance and confusion and attachment and so forth, that creates an unhealthy self. And a lot of spiritual practice is developing a healthier self that can then relate and engage in the world with others in a wholesome, healthy way.
Would it be for the benefit of the mind and the body, or the body only? Because the mind is as you say, it's just a construct, so it just happens, and it's there for the survival and the welfare and the adaptation of the body, of physical.
Yeah, I would say for the mind as well, so that the mind needing to connect or communicate needs that relational tool. And the body is for the purpose of supporting the mind, and then let's say even mind and body, or mentality and body as in brain neural connections, create this mental phenomena that we call the self. So that the self is that which is helpful for mind and body. Like the self is needed to go, oh, let's go to meditation on a Thursday night so the mind can have some peace. Or let's meditation each day so the mind can have some peace.
So, like when I'm meditating, often it's like there's the watcher watching the self. So it's like I can sort of see the self doing things. So then I'm not the self because I'm watching the self. So is that then, and it's helpful to watch the self and see it because it gives you distance from the self. And so therefore you don't have to identify so strongly with those things that the self is doing because you know you're not the self because you can see the self. So then is the watcher still the self?
Well, it depends upon whether the watcher is a pseudo self, sort of where the self is like stepping back. I see myself, which again is self-seeing itself a few sort of milliseconds sort of afterwards, or whether it's just, as in meditation, a knowingness, the faculty, the mind faculty of knowingness. But when a comment comes up, there I go again. That's basically self.
So is it thinking or no thinking? Is that the distinction? So if I'm only knowing and there's no thinking, and I can be aware, but not with that thinking process involved?
Generally so, because the self suddenly comes into play when there's thought. So even the idea of concepts or words, concepts give rise to conceiving, giving birth to, conceiving, thinking, which then creates conceit, identity, I am. Concept, conceiving, conceit. Which is why in meditation, where there's no thought, then that helps the self construct to become sort of less apparent, even dissolve, and they're just awarenessing the present moment.
So I'm just trying to understand the process. All of this is very in the head to make sure. So it's like accepting. I'm just coming from like a linguistic point of view and identity and construct. So it's like accepting that, living in this material world, in a physical body, that it's natural to have identity to get by, because every time we talk or interact with another being, there's a hat on, right? And then the next person, it might be a different hat. So in order for us to kind of navigate and get by throughout the world and do our jobs and all of that, but not allowing that identity to control everything. So because our identity still has thoughts like cravings and aversions, but not, I guess, buying into it, right? And every time we meditate and then we catch our thought wandering, that's not their self. So that's, like we can catch it, because who is catching it? Is something, like they.
Well, there can be awareness. Identity is more a construct, and that can be created in different ways, whatever the mind is going to identify with and then identify as, and that changes all the time. From identifying as in professional role, and then leaving. Now I'm a partner, or now I'm a mother, or now I'm a brother, or whatever it might be. So we can see how identity is modified throughout the day, and identity is a construct. You're employed, you're no longer employed. You've got the sack. I'm no longer employed. I'm not one of these. So it can change very, very quickly.
And the key is to not always be subjective, because it's just an identity.
That's right.
And that's where the suffering comes.
Yeah.
Right? So if we got sacked.
If the mind is stuck or attached to it, that's where the suffering is. Because everything's in flow, in flux, in change. So even appreciating the wisdom teachings from different traditions, certainly Buddhism emphasizing everything's impermanent. Source of stress and suffering is the attachment, not so much the things themselves, but the attachment or identification to the things. And because if the mind is attached to things that are going to change, that's where there's suffering. Even if the thing isn't changing, but there's a fear that it's going to change. Or when it does change, then holding on, not letting go, which doesn't allow a new thing to occur. So in where it's spoken about, in many ways, the practice is about letting go. Doesn't mean that there's a rejection or a reaction, but more just a letting go of the attachment, and especially the deluded attachment to things. So there's still engaging the role of being a professional, a partner, a parent, a brother, sister, friend, whatever, engaging the role, but not clinging to it.
So then, like, what's the difference between, there is a distinction still between identity and when you term it self, or is it the same thing, self and identity? Like, I'm just, because, like this.
Generally, it's the same thing.
Yeah, okay, so it's the same thing.
And people, I am a this or that. It's just like, well, that's sort of part of yourself, or maybe the whole of yourself.
Because when, I've heard the phrase or philosophical phrase, and when some of you might have heard it before, know thyself. So when they're talking about know thyself, it's like understanding, so you're not controlled by it, right? To really know yourself.
Sure. Yeah. And in many ways, that's what the Ajahn was even talking about, to get to know not just yourself, but even what is the self, which is an extra movement beyond like get to know who you are, but more like get to know what is this phenomena that we call the self. And particularly Buddhism's very much about that, not taking the self for granted. Everyone's got a self. Everyone is their self. Live from your true self. It's like, well, what is the self? Not just the who, but the what. What is this phenomena? Because the who, the personalizing it, is part of the delusion, part of the confusion, part of the illusion. So realizing and waking up to the self is a process. It's not a personal pronoun. It's a process. It's an activity, selfing activity. And again, meditation helps the mind to see the self happening. It might be just sitting, breathing, and then there might be a sound. And oh, is that one of those? Oh, I've got one of those as well. Reminds me of that I need to get a new one. And do they sell them at the end of the financial year? And suddenly we're creating time and future. How many days to go? And stress, and can I arrange my weekend to get one before the end of the financial year? All because of a sound that was heard. So with just the pure awareness, hearing, and that's it. But the mind's developed and evolved in many ways for safety, to be able to identify something. It's one of those, is it going to cause stress or confront me? Is it dangerous? Remembering stuff, planning stuff. So the process is awakening to notice that whole process going on and not being bullied or buying into it in a way that causes more stress and suffering. So in a way, it's only the self that suffers. The body experiences pain. When pain is just a strong sensation, a hot sensation, a sharp sensation. Pain, sort of like a dirty word. We don't like pain, but it's just a strong sensation that's not so pleasant. But it's about seeing how much there's things added onto that creates this whole drama, even melodrama, that we call life. So waking up to that, so that the mind is free. The mind heart is freed from the suffering that comes from the limitation of self. So again, still having a self, the mind needs a self, this relational tool, but there's less being fooled by it.
John, it's interesting. I had this similar conversation with someone recently. So we were discussing having a mind, obviously, and then the witness as well, as someone mentioned. And then the person I was talking to was like, okay, we have a mind, but there's also a witness beyond the mind. And then we thought about it, and like, how can you know there's a witness unless it's within the field of knowing, which suggests that you can't even know there's a witness without there's a mind. And then we go into this bit of a pickle, because if you're suggesting there's a witness, it's almost like you're reinforcing this idea of a refined self. You're just repackaging the self in a more refined way.
Yeah.
And then you use the word Brahman, realizing Brahman with synonymous with Nirvana, but then even the Brahman suggests that there's a higher divine self. And I remember Swami mentioned this as well, like it's about merging the observer with the pure consciousness, but even that seems to be a more elaborate again version of the self. And then I would assume that the Buddhist approach is above and beyond all of these things.
And language becomes the issue, because what we mean by certain concepts that we use, that we could be, even one concept can be taken differently. And even especially where our English language tends to personalize things, so that if there's thinking, then we go, well, there must be a thinker. If there's witnessing, there must be a witnesser. So we personalize it, create it into a person or a being. If there's awareness, there must be an awarenesser. If there's knowing, there must be a knower. But that's not necessarily the case. There's just it's a verb. It doesn't have to become a noun, especially a proper noun. There's just thinking. Doesn't have to be a thinker. This is just the brain's thinking, or the brain's knowing, or the brain mind is aware. It's as opposed to having an awarenesser, which is not a proper word.
Yeah, the process.
Yeah, Ajahn JSR often brings up the phrase "it is raining," and the question is, what is the it? The language forces an it into the formula, but really there is no it.
Yeah.
So just
Raining. Yes, so the sense of, and that's part of how our language has been constructed, to always take a reference point. So then there's duality in terms of I am cold. So that's as if there's someone there that's cold, as opposed to the body is cold, or the brain's perceiving the coldness of the body without the need to personalize it. But the personalizing is there just as an arbitrary type of helpful add-on to go, oh, I will go and get my jumper, as opposed to there is cold and the body just stays cold because there's no one looking after it.
That's when you've got to use the tool of the self to get
The tool of the self, yes. It's the iPhone.
Order a jumper.
Call in. So obviously we need to finish up for this evening, but wonderful to have Ajahn Tiradhammo here for the Thursday evening and Sunday session. And I enjoyed having his presence. He stayed with me here. So we had lots of times to talk and discuss things and ask lots of questions, and also checking in with how the monks and nuns are doing around the place, around the world, and what's happening in terms of Buddhism and monastic life as well. So I might sort of share some of that information as well down the track. But certainly special to have someone like himself, a Buddhist monk for 51 years. There's not many of those around, especially Western monastics. So a special occasion to come and be here and be with him and receive some teachings. And obviously to connect with him through his book. There's still copies down there if you didn't get one. And certainly invited him to come back and spend some time with us when he can again, hopefully by next year again. And in the meantime, also to maybe other monks or nuns that might be passing through as well. So thank you for sharing this evening, and thanks for coming out on this cool evening. Stay well and stay warm, and see you next time.